census jobs, those are not long-term jobs, those are temporary. We want private sector job creation. That's why my view of the tax system needs to be one where you have certainty. What I've said on taxes is I believe very clearly we ought to have a one-year hold on everything. Keep it exactly the way it is, including people above $250,000, because create certainty for that 1 year. But if you want to talk about deficits and discuss this, and there's trillions of dollars of deficit, if you kept this current tax policy intact, that's a recipe for disaster, which I don't think any of us want. Mr. West does support that. My view is take this next year, bring our businesses, bring our families, bring our senior citizens together and say, what is the way that everyone has some participation in fixing this deficit? Cut spending, line by line in the budget, but then figure out how do we pay for it, and everyone has to do it. But the principles that we should do this relate to business, small business in particular, and that would be make sure you have tax policies to keep capital gains low, dividends, ways to stimulate entrepreneurship, investment in small business so we can grow the economy and create jobs. That's how we're going to create jobs in the United States.
Mr. Argan, a question for Mr. West.
Mr. West, can you explain the following statements that you made at a Fort Lauderdale Tea Party rally? Quote, "You must be well-informed and well-armed because this government that we have right now is a tyrannical government."
I think actually what that was done at the a rally in October 2009, and it was held at the Revolution. And one of the things that what happened at that rally was there was a fife and drum corps. It was a Revolutionary War theme. And there was also a gentleman that stood off to the side that was dressed in a Continental Army uniform. He had a musket and he did have a bayonet. So what I was talking about metaphorically is that people need to be able to come and stand up with their musket and also stand up with a fixed bayonet to fight against a tyranny that we have seen coming back to the British and that we're seeing now. Because one of the things that was happening back then was the American people were saying we did not want this health care law, but yet it was being pushed and pushed, and then of course it was rammed down their throats. Now I would tell everyone here, maybe folks don't like to study history and don't understand history, but if you go back to what happened at Gettysburg on the second day at Little Round Top, and that was Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, and he said one word, and he said the word bayonets. And the reason why he said bayonets, and the reason why I use that word, is because in that situation where he was out of ammunition, out of water, casualties were mounting, he said that one word that had never been said in the Union Army, and that rallied those men. And I think that that was a rallying word that we could use today. Not to say you're going to pick up a bayonet and go stick anybody with it, but it's the spirit of it. It's the metaphorical understanding of it. And I think that's what I was trying to convey.
Thank you. Moving on to round two, Mr. Bennett, if you'll ask a question to Mr. West.
Sure. Mr. West, on Friday night, NBC News had a report about your involvement in the South Florida motorcycle community.
Yeah.
And specifically, it raised the issue of a group called the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, which federal authorities have said is an organized criminal enterprise. And it brought up an email where somebody had advised you that it wasn't a good idea to participate in an event that might include the Outlaws. And your response was, please, no more references to criminal. And you also said, I was never more amazed at how members of the Outlaws guarded me during the interview. I was wondering if you can elaborate on that.
Sure,
and why
absolutely.
you think...
What happened was that previously, I ride motorcycles. I've been riding motorcycles since 1985, and there are many different people that ride motorcycles here in South Florida. As a matter of fact, this past Saturday, I rode in a motorcycle rally for breast cancer awareness, Think Pink. And, you know, many different people were there, and because this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I've been asked to go and speak to different organizations, and one of the times I was asked to speak was a constitutional rights rally. Now, I believe in this. I believe that every American should hear about our Constitution and understand the principles and values of this country. Now, there were gentlemen that were there from another group. That does not mean that I'm associated with that group. And if anyone wants to talk about my character, let me tell you something. Folks, I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't party. You can ask anyone that knows me. I don't hang out with gangs. My life is very simple. It is about trying to get a message out about this country, about the greatness of this country. And I think that that message should go to anyone. So that if you want to talk about me being associated with a criminal gang, I am not associated with a criminal gang. I've never ridden with a criminal gang, and I don't wear any type of colors. I am what you call an independent motorcycle rider. But I think one of the critical things that you need to understand as well, if you want to talk about guilt by association, on the exact same Friday, my opponent was out stumping and campaign trailing with a person that's an impeached federal judge. Does that mean that he is a criminal or there should be some allegations against him? As well, there was a person by the name of Congressman John Lewis who came down here who was a member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we know some of the problems that we have in the Congressional Black Caucus. Right now you have Charlie Rangel up for ethics charges, Maxine Waters. We know you have Congressman Jefferson who is sitting in jail. Does that mean that there is some association loosely tied to my opponent because of that? So, no, I have nothing to do with motorcycle gangs.
Thank you, sir. Just a word to the audience. Just a word to the audience. You've been very, very cooperative so far. Let's keep it that way. Thank you very much. And Congressman Klein, this is a question for Mr. Bennett.
Congressman Klein, following up on his answer there, Mr. West said he's not associated with any motorcycle gangs, but what do you think about his judgment of that saying, you know, please don't, no references to criminal with relation to the outlaws?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, this is not about motorcycle riders. We have a lot of great people in this community, in this room, ride motorcycles, a lot of veterans groups that ride motorcycles, a lot of them are supporting me, and that's great. This issue is about association with a criminal group. And the issue is, you know, a pattern of conduct. Once again, reckless decisions. You know, the association of an email that specifically says that he, according to the NBC News report, that there's an email that says that he appreciates or the support or the cover or whatever it was as related to when he went to some press event. That's association. Now, I don't know if he's part of the group or not part of the group. It's just the association of tied into a criminal group. Now, this is not anything other than that. So, I mean, the record speaks for itself, and he needs to respond to that. But I think more importantly, this is, again, to me, just a decision-making. I appreciate Mr. West's military service. I appreciate any man or woman who puts on the uniform. We as Americans have every responsibility to support our men and women on the battlefield and give them everything they need, and when they come home, support them as veterans. But this is about choices after military service. The issues that he mentioned earlier about the liens and things like that, most of those were after he came back. He was not part of the military. He chose to live outside the district. Mr. West doesn't even live in this congressional district. He lives in Debbie Wasserman Schultz's district. These are about choices that you make in association with either something that law enforcement says is a criminal gang or anything else. I think it's just bad judgment.
Mr. Dargan, a question for Mr. West.
Mr. West.
Yes, ma'am.
You have said you oppose the stimulus. How do you propose to get the country back on track?
I think that when you look at economic principles, when Japan faced a recession, they tried to do 8 to 9 stimulus packages, and they kept themselves in a recession for about a decade. I think that government spending is not the way to go. I think that if we had looked at a payroll tax holiday, look at the means by which we can infuse cash into the pockets of employees and employers so that we can grow our economy, that's the way we should, the direction we should be taking. You know, one of the things is right now the public sector is outpacing the private sector 2 to 1 in compensation. And also the public sector is at 9% growth. That is not the way that we're going to grow the economy. By growing the economy, that means very simply, we have got to put money back into the pockets of Americans because that is where investment, ingenuity, and innovation comes from. Only thing you get out of the government spending is raising taxes, printing more money, or borrowing more money. So the most important thing I think we need to look at our corporate business tax rate as well, 33 to 35%. That is the second highest in the world. We are forcing our corporations and businesses to leave our shores because we're not setting the right business conditions here for them to hire people. So we need to flatten that out, 16 to 17%, so that we are giving them the incentive to come back here and hire Americans, especially here in South Florida, where we do have an unemployment rate in South Florida of 13%. We have great weather. We need to be incentivizing the means by which people will come here, and that is how we will have long-term sustainable economic growth.
Ms. Dargan, question for Mr. Klein.
Congressman Klein, the United States needs to become more energy independent. Are you for or against offshore drilling? You also supported the cap and trade bill. What do you say to critics who call it a cap and tax and say it will just increase more costs to energy bills?
Well, I am firmly against offshore drilling. I've been firmly against it from the very beginning. And if you live here in Palm Beach, you should be all over this and making sure we don't have drilling off the coast of the East Coast, off Palm Beach, or the West Coast. And if you didn't learn, if we didn't learn as a country our lesson, what happened with Deepwater Horizons, then shame on all of us. And I think we need to take responsibility for that. The bottom line is this. This is not about oil drilling. That's the problem that my opponent has. He has gone over this over and over again. He supports oil drilling unnecessarily. we will have oil drilling, but we should have it in places where we can make sure that it's under control. If there's an accident, 24 hours later, it's shut down. There will be accidents. It has to be in places where we can control the possibility of spills. We have a multi-billion-dollar industry in Florida.